Every single Thursday, it is our C-suite exclusive. What a dynamic man he is. At the age of 17, he founded his advertising and marketing agency with just 2,000 Rand. That's about 112 US dollars. His 20 years in the marketing industry have enabled him to lead a network of leading African marketing agencies in SADC and West Africa. Zibusiso Mkhwanazi has just published a book on his entrepreneurial journey. Business by Grace is what it's titled, and he joins us live in studio. Good to have you with us, Zibusiso.
Good afternoon, Tammy. Thank you for the invite.
My goodness, I'm sure everybody's listening and thinking he started at 17 and, all of these decades later, he's managed to build, such a big business. But perhaps put it into context for us. You, as Avatar, have had quite a number of, blue chip, I would call them blue chip clients and accounts that you've worked on. Give us a little bit of a sneak preview about some of the highlights of your career.
Okay. Good afternoon to all the listeners too. So, the journey of Avatar started in 2012. So I was involved with other businesses, and then in 2012 it became Avatar. All of them led up to Avatar. And in this journey, we've worked with basically the market leaders across multiple industries. Notably, I think recently, the ABSA account, where we handle the advertising and marketing in South Africa. But our work goes out to a number of countries on the African continent. Companies like Techno, right, which is a global smartphone manufacturing company. We've handled them across the African continent, as well as a number of continents, being Europe, being South America, in a number of emerging markets as well, around the globe. So we've worked the length and breadth of the country. I think at one time we ran a study that some of our work in a single year reaches over 1 billion people.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning earlier on that one of your clients has been National Geographic.
Oh, yeah.
And how has that been
clients.
for you?
Yeah. In fact, as part of our global clients, Fox International Channels and National Geographic was the first one, and it was very interesting how we actually won that piece of business. The lady that used to run it at the time just saw, these guys with big dreams, and we were pushing very hard, and she just believed in us, and she gave us the account.
And how do you instill confidence? I mean, at that stage, as you mentioned, they were one of your first big global clients.
Yeah.
How do you instill confidence? How do you get a client of that nature and magnitude to say, you know what, I'm going to give these boys a chance?
Yeah. So at the time, or rather, let me phrase it in this way. What I've learned about business is that people are interested in one of two things, right? How do you help me make money, or how do you help me save money, right? That's the universal rule of every business. And when you understand that, you get to understand their problems as well, and once you understand their problems, then what you do, how do you help them in that objective, and so we were able to phrase that for National Geographic in essence, being such a diverse brand that speaks to so many different people, as well as Fox, shows, in South Africa, you sell a show in this way. In West Africa, you sell it in this way. In East Africa, you sell it in this way. And because we're able to craft that solution, right, we're able to solve some very serious business problems on their behalf. And that's how we got the account.
I mean, your answer just really highlights your perspective and how you approach the clients. It's always about a solution for them. It's not so much about your business,
100%.
but it's about what you can do for them and the value that you're going to be adding to their particular business. And so that seems to be quite key in your approach. You've also worked in China.
Yes.
How was that experience for you, as far as just the dynamics, like a young African man just walking and working
in Shanghai?
In Shanghai. Yeah.
Very interesting. Just the first and foremost is the language barrier that you first need to get through, and try and make out what is being said in calls, in meetings. I remember how we actually started working in China. So it was actually the techno business, and we got the opportunity to pitch, to the techno team in China. And this call was supposed to happen. Sorry, this pitch was supposed to happen online, and we insisted that no, we'll come to China, right? We want to pitch in person.
Wow.
Got on a plane, got there, right? And we were the only agency. I mean, then we were pitching against the top agencies in London, the top agencies in France, in America, basically the best in the world. But the one thing that made us stand out was it was an online pitch, but we said, no, we'll come. And just that one move, right, got them believing that actually these are the people that we want to work with.
You went the extra mile.
We went the extra mile. If you want to stand out, you need to do something different. Just don't be like the next person, right? And that's how we instilled confidence in an unknown agency in the Chinese world. And we were appointed.
And an African agency.
And an African agency.
An African agency. Let's get to your book, Business by Grace.
Yeah.
What led you to decide to actually pen your experiences into a book? Because it's not really just an autobiography.
Yeah.
It's not just a memoir, but it's very much of a business tool and an A to Z, the ups and downs of business. You talk about making millions and losing millions. And
losing it all.
And then making it again.
So it was about my life story. My purpose is to make a positive difference in people's lives. And the book is an amplification of that purpose, right? So how can I reach as many people and make a positive difference? So this is not one of those books that is about a before and an after. What this book is about, it's about the story of resilience, right? Starting small and being resilient. It's facing the challenges as they come your direction. How do you maintain the course, right? And, what more powerful way is there? As Africans, we are storytellers. So telling my story, but also wrapping business lessons, strategy lessons, around, telling the story. Because then it becomes memorable, then it becomes really powerful, versus writing a textbook, But I think, stories have got the power, to change hearts, to change mindset,
You see it in color.
Exactly.
Literally, I still remember when I was reading your book, one of the places where my heart just sank and I felt so sad and just hurt, because I think, anybody who's been in business or has had any idea or something that is precious to them that they've built, when that is taken away from them, literally stolen from them, from under their feet, because of naivety or lack of experience or just contracts that are worded in ways that are tricky, and you just don't have, I guess, the wisdom at that time to be able to discern what was going on. Talk to us about that. It was earlier on in your career, you and your business partner had, built quite a sizable, business, but you lost that.
I lost that. Yes. So I was very young. So I signed a deal that, in essence, without going into all the intricacies, led to, me losing my majority ownership of the business and becoming a minority owner of the business.
Your business.
My own business.
Your own, that you started in your mom's house, literally.
I was outsmarted.
You were outsmarted.
At the time. I was very young. I was, 22, 23 years old, and sometimes people tend to take advantage of that, and I was taking, I fell into it and I lost it, and I lost it all, but what was very interesting is the lessons that come from that, right? Because then till this day, right, I will never forget that lesson.
I'm sure the contract,
the devil is in the detail.
And there's no devil that's going to catch you unawares.
But that's the thing, because I was never trained formally in business at the time, right? So it meant that that's the only way you learn. You learn by doing the wrong things. But by through all those lessons, I've seemingly become much better.
Well, we certainly hope so, with an organization as big as Avatar that you're running now. So what do you hope Business by Grace will achieve for the budding entrepreneur, and even for a person who says, I am myself wherever I am? and this is one of the phrases that I like even for myself. I say, wherever I go,
Yeah.
I take myself
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah.
So you don't end up being a disjointed individual, depending on which context you are found.
Yeah.
And just reading your book, it seems like that's a principle that you yourself are ascribing to, that uniformity, that congruency in who you are and your identity,
Yeah.
and marrying the essence of who you are, your being,
Yes.
with your work.
Yes, absolutely. I think for me, I call it the foundation, right? In that for a long time, so before I found grace, and when I say I found grace, so before I built the business, I built this business just purely on transactional. It was just a very transactional thing. I want to make money, just like everyone else. I want to live a good life, etc., etc. Right? But in losing it all, right, that's where I found purpose, right? And in finding purpose, then I understood and through my journey with God, the importance of spirituality in business in particular, and infusing it in how you do business. And that's in essence infusing myself and my newfound belief in my business journey. Now, yes,
go ahead, please.
right. So now in this newfound journey, then it is now when I write the book, right, it's about, so whatever your dream may be, right, it's how do you link it to your purpose and what you are meant to be doing, right? And I'm hoping that the book almost becomes a guide to finding that crucible moment, like how I found my crucible moment, right? And once you found that moment, how do you marry it to whatever your dreams may be, right? Because then it won't feel like you're working anymore. It will feel like, actually, now I'm doing something I ought to be doing, right? And that's how you truly become successful at it.
There's a book I remember that I read many, many years ago. Can't remember the author, but his name was Nick somebody.
Okay.
And the book was titled The Work You Were Born to Do.
Wow.
And literally that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's about the work you were born to do, what your gifts are, what your talents are, the contribution that you're here to make to mankind, to industries, to humanity, and walking as your being through your life.
Yeah. I mean, let's think about this, right? The one thing you cannot fail at is being yourself.
Right.
It's the most natural thing to us, right? So being your natural self and your spiritual self and infusing it into a purpose, and an idea, a big idea, right? You naturally are more likely to succeed at it.
What I love is you literally a case study of the fact that it is possible.
Yeah.
That you don't have to be disjointed. You don't have to have a game face and a you face. You can be you, and your game face can be you.
Yeah.
And there doesn't have to be like a chasm between the two. Zibusiso Mkhwanazi, absolutely awesome speaking with you and hosting you on the C-Suite today. His book is available. I'm sure you can find it absolutely everywhere, right?
It's in bookshops. We've got a website, mkhwanazi.co.za, so you can buy it online, but yeah.
And it's titled Business by Grace. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your inspiring story and your walk with grace and your walk with business.
Thank you.
That's Zibusiso Mkhwanazi taking us to exactly 4:52 Central African Time.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
South African Reserve Bank says that despite ongoing economic uncertainty, South Africa's financial sector continues to show resilience. However, the bank warns that a challenging macroeconomic and geopolitical landscape calls for heightened vigilance from financial sector supervisors. This was highlighted during a media breakfast hosted by the Reserve Bank and the Prudential Authority following the release of the organization's 2024-2025 annual report. Channel Africa reporter Innocent Simosa has more.
The 2024-2025 annual report highlights the Prudential Authority's extensive supervisory work across South Africa's financial institutions. Deputy Governor of the South African Reserve Bank and CEO of the Prudential Authority, Fundi Chazibana, says as banks continue to reduce their physical presence, the Reserve Bank is intensifying its oversight to respond to emerging risks, particularly in the area of cybersecurity.
We don't tell you what to do. We ask you questions. Are you aware of the risks that you are now exposing yourself to? And are you able to manage them? So I'm going to talk about two very quickly and then hand over. So as you digitize, there would be potentially closure of branches, not necessarily in our forte.
Chadzibana says the South African Reserve Bank plays a key role in overseeing the governance and security of the digital financial platforms.
Is if now all of us are banking through our phones and there is a system outage, we would ask very different questions about the system outage as the PA relative to the FSCA. The FSCA would ask about you and I, the fact that we cannot bank. We would be asking about system integrity issue and what has happened on the prudential side, on the safety, because remember, you've now are using a new tool and you've got to understand the implications of it for your business.
Faisal Jina, head of the Risk Support Department at the Prudential Authority, shared insights on the impact of emerging risks and how they are being closely monitored.
And to the extent our unemployment is very high, consumers are experiencing strain, and that has an impact on particular lending institutions, but also on insurers in terms of lapse risk and policies being surrendered or just policy just lapsing. Some of the other things that we look at, they are linked. I mean, with the low growth story is also this issue around infrastructure, security, what impacts. So it kind of loops back to the low growth story in terms of is our rail infrastructure good enough? Things like water, power, those type of things, in terms of what impact does it actually have on growth, because ultimately it has a knock-on impact overall.
And these are the focus areas.
From a lending perspective, I can put it this way. We've seen, or more recently, lending go towards the corporate sector, but also towards the sovereign, and less so because institutions have less appetite because of the creditworthiness of retail clients potentially. As I mentioned earlier, retail customers are under a bit of pressure. So in terms of how those funds are being channeled, both to corporates but also to the sovereign, we also monitor that risk quite carefully because it has implications for the broader financial sector.
One of the key risk factors highlighted is the tariffs imposed on South Africa by US President Donald Trump. However, there is still hope that negotiations could ease trade tensions. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Simosa in Johannesburg.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Tami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It has gone exactly 4:56 Central African time, and that's how we come to the end of Africa in Business for today. But before that, bonjour to you, Joël. She's coming up with Vue d'Afrique in just a moment.
Bonjour Tami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Sur Vue d'Afrique, il sera question du rapport d'Oxfam publié ce jeudi. 4 des milliardaires les plus riches d'Afrique détiennent la richesse combinée de la moitié de la population en Afrique. On parlera également des autorités togolaises qui émettent certains mandats, mais aussi pour les grands titres du Cameroun. La polémique enfle de nouveau sur une éventuelle candidature de Paul Biya. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Tami.
Merci beaucoup, Joël. C'est Joël with Vue d'Afrique coming up from 5 p.m. Central African time. To our producer, Mabo Bulok, our technical operator, Dandolo Tuli, and on social media, Nzako Mashaba. I am Tami Ngubeni. This has been Africa in Business on Channel Africa. À demain, tout à l'heure.